Really excited for the topic today. So we're going to talk about outbound in 2025. What's new, what's dead, and what we think is never going to go out of style. We're gonna talk about some pretty provocative topics today. Um, what we think the future of outbound is next year. We're going to talk about AI. I'll introduce our guests here in a second too. And for those of you asking in the chat, yes, the session today is going to be recorded and we'll send it out and all of that kind of good stuff. But we're going to talk about channels. So, phone, email, social, in person, what's working right now, what isn't, referrals. We're going to talk about this concept Adam Robinson, if you follow him, calls inbound led outbound, and all of that stuff in between. Before we dig in, I want to thank our sponsor, ZoomInfo. Just one of my favorite tools in terms of there are a lot of people that say that they're using AI, but Copilot, I've tested it a ton, and there's just a lot of really badass things that it'll kind of help populate for you to help you get started. The analogy that I always like to use is black pen versus red pen. Black pen requires you to think of everything from scratch. Red pen is more of like serve me up some options and let me edit, and it does a really, really good job of helping point you in the right direction, especially when you're thinking about outbound. So go check out ZoomInfo. Want to introduce our guests. We have some really cool guests today. Kayla is VP of Enterprise Sale at ZoomInfo. So Kayla,
Hey
good to have you
everyone.
on again.
Thanks for having me.
Scott, I think Scott, this is our first webinar that we've actually done together. I know we've done some podcasts and all that kind of good stuff, but Scott is a four or
Yeah,
five or six-time VP of sales. I can't remember. One of those
a lot.
things. He spent a lot of time in the executive seat, and he's now CEO and founder at Scott Leese Consulting, where they work with a lot of cool companies, advising them on sales, go-to-market, and sort of everywhere in between. And lastly, if you're coming across our stuff for the first time, my name's Jason. I run Outbound Squad. We do sales training, coaching, consulting for companies like Shopify, Gong, Zoom, and a lot of other cool, great software companies. So for today, what we're going to do is a couple things. We have 5 different topics that we're going to get our guests and myself. I have a little bit of a take on some of these too. We're going to work through those. At any point, if you guys have questions, the Q&A button at the bottom is the place to kind of put them so that we can see them. We would love for this to be as interactive as possible. So without further ado, let's get to it, you guys. So one of the first topics that I would like to cover with you is outbound still worth the effort? I think that there's, like, if we just look at the data, like when I see stuff like this, the average cold email reply rate being 1%, and this is actually better than what I see at a lot of the companies that I work with. It's like 0.3% for a lot of the companies that I work with. 5% chance that a customer picks up the call when you call them or less. And there's varying data out there, but somewhere between 1.5% and 2% success rate across the board for when someone does pick up, actually converting them into a meeting. So that's kind of the doom and gloom I feel like of outbound right now and what's going on. So I'd like to open it up, and Scott, I'll start with you. Um, when you think about outbound, what's it like right now versus when previously you were a VP of sales, like running sales teams? Like what's changed, and how do you feel like it is worth the effort in 2025?
Well, those numbers have changed for one. That if you flash that slide back up there, that's not what it used to be like at all.
Yeah.
You could make 100 calls in a day, just pulling a number out that everybody's used to hearing, and 50 people might pick up the phone, and 25 of those people you'd be able to have a decent conversation with. 12 of them would be pretty interested. 8 of them you'd set an appointment. You see what I'm saying? Like the numbers were just like massively easier to help you attain results. Similarly
Yeah.
with email. So I think it's inarguable at this point that the phone and email are in trouble, right? Um, the thing that is interesting to me though is actually the definition of outbound has to change or has changed depending on what organization you're in. I think most people have traditionally thought of it only as phone, email, stuff like that. But everything can be considered outbounding now. You could argue that me or Kayla or you for that matter, being on this webinar right now is a form of outbounding. You've done an amazing job cultivating this community and this show. There's almost 600 people here in the middle of the day, you know, on a Wednesday. I think it's Wednesday, whatever day it is, right? I don't know who these 600 people are. These 600 people may or may not be potential prospects of all of ours, right? And I could go try to call everybody or email everybody, but instead, this webinar could be a form of an outbound. Going to events could be a form. Hosting, you know, prospect dinners and things like that
Yep.
could be a form of outbound. Um, Referral-based motions and partnerships could be a form of outbound. Direct mail could be a form of outbound. So I think we just need to revise the historical definition of what outbound means first and foremost. And I think if you do that, then the answer to me is still yes, outbound is super important, still super relevant.
Yeah. It's the this is where we both agree very heavily on this. It's the pure cold at the enterprise level, especially of I'm just going to
Right.
smile and dial and not even know anything about the people I'm reaching out to. You could get away with that like 3 or 4 years ago with some automation. And that was like really cool to see some of those things in an email, let's say. But that smiling and dialing definitely going out of style. But Kayla, like, what's your perspective on this? You work at a company that sells the data that people need to do these types of outbound efforts. Um, what's it been like for you in the last 2 or 3 years seeing the progression? And from an effort standpoint, is this still worth the effort in 2025?
I love this question. And Scott, thank you for bringing me back to, gosh, over 10 years ago when I remember having one, what we would call day a week. I was in outside sales, door to door. But once a week on Wednesdays, we would be in an office and we would need to be booking our in-person meetings the following week. And to your good point, Scott, if I made 100 phone calls, I would book about 8 meetings. And then I'd convert half of those to,
Yeah.
bids, and then maybe half of those to new customers. That's changed. Like everything in life, sales and outbound has evolved. It ebbs and flows. There's a lot of factors that go into this. I think unequivocally, outbound still exists and there's a need for it. But what I think is that we can't try to boil the ocean. Lots of us have really large addressable markets. Some of us, nearly any business could use your product or service. Guess what? That's not a great way to spend your time. But what you can do is you can think about really important moments within a business's evolution that make it more likely for them to need your services or products. And that's what ZoomInfo does. And we drink our own champagne. A lot of companies could be our customer. But what we look for are really interesting events within, using data and insights so that we can target those companies at the right time in their buying journey. So I am 100% on board with outbound. I think your timing is critical.
Yeah. It's really turning into a game of it's harder to get people to pick up the phone and to want to communicate with us on the phone, to get them to open the email and reply. So we have to be really picky about where we choose to spend our effort. The thing that I was taught in sales was we don't want our pipeline to look like a pipeline. We want it to look like more of a martini glass, where it's like we're going to choose where to spend time and then go deeper with that. Another perspective that I have on this that I would love your guys' take on is I think that for the first time in a long time, we've really had to think about how we upgrade the offer, like the thing that we are going to give them in return for meeting with us. And what I'm not talking about is a DoorDash gift card. Do you guys get those emails where they're like, "Yeah, lunch is on me, Scott. Here's a $15 DoorDash." I'm like, "What am I going to get on DoorDash for 15 bucks? That like barely covers the delivery fee."
I get
Literally.
the I get the coffee ones all the time.
Yeah, I'm like, I can afford my own coffee, and so can every executive that you reach out to. They can afford their own coffee. Um, I want to share some ideas that I'm seeing with some of my clients, and I'd love to get your guys' take on it. I think the problem is that buyers by this time, most of them are experienced enough that they've wasted a ton of time on shitty sales calls. They've also been burned. I mean, Gartner, I don't have it here, but Gartner's got a stat that 53% of B2B buyers regretted the software purchase that they made. So over half the time, people get burned purchasing something that they thought was going to do the thing that you promised. And over half the time, they really dislike spending time with that rep. So how do we think about like upgrading what they're going to get? So one of the things that I thought was really interesting is if you guys are able to experience the brand. So for example, not every company can do this, but if you sell to companies that sell B2C, you can actually experience their brand and what it's like to be a customer. So Shopify, for example, sells into ecom. I mean, one of their reps landed a big meeting. Like one of the things they did is they just went into a store, took a picture of themselves in front of the store, got some intel from what was going on in the store, and they just bubbled that up to a VP of marketing. So like experiencing the brand, if you're able to do that, that's like that extra little thing that I feel like can make a huge, huge difference. There's a couple more examples I want to share with you guys real quick, and I'd love your take, like just on this concept. Um, and I'll kind of skip around to the ones that I thought were really good here. One of them is this idea of showing the problem. And again, you can't do this with everyone, but one of the things is like before you reach out to a company, let's say that's selling ecom or whatever thing that you can visually see, like doing some sort of audit or something where you can show them the actual problem that they're having. Like one of the things I know that you guys do at ZoomInfo, at least on the SMB and mid-market side, is you guys will actually look at like signals of people searching for their services in their region. Like I thought that was pretty cool. The other thing I'm seeing a big trend of, and this will be the last one, is just offering other free stuff. So if you have the ability to give something away for free or to trial some sort of your product, like that's like a really good, valuable give when you're doing outbound. I'll kind of open this up to both of you here. What are your guys' thoughts on this idea of how do we rethink what we're actually going to give them if they decide to take a meeting with us?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think it's so interesting to hear the feedback from stakeholders who have met with, dozens or potentially even hundreds of us sellers, and not all experiences were great experiences. And so they may have a bad taste in their mouth. They may feel like they've gotten that bait and switch before. And so to your point, Jason, I think at times seeing is believing. We lean on that here at ZoomInfo. So let's just take my first sales gig, right? I sold business solutions and supplies to B2B companies. Well, let's say I'm targeting a small regional office supplier at ZoomInfo. I want to earn their business. I can show them companies within their area that are doing research on things like janitorial supplies, facility supplies, office supplies. And I can show them in an email where they are and that contact information associated with their potential buying committee. Seeing is believing. Here's something that we have. We think it would add value and help you sell more. Are you interested in having a conversation? Could you meet tomorrow at 4? Seeing is believing. And that helps.
There's a lot of like products now that allow you to create demo environments like of a small part of your product so that you can give them something to actually see. But Scott, what were you gonna add?
Well, can you go back to that slide for me?
Yeah, no problem.
The
All right, here we go. There we go.
Yeah, the experience the brand part is really good advice and directionally like kind of fun. You can do that if you go to conferences and events. You don't have to go to somebody's office per se or their retail store. That's a good one. The show the problem thing, that doesn't feel new to me. I mean, I was doing that in 2004,
Yeah.
right? I would call you up. I'm just making something up, but I'd call you up and be like, hey, I was looking at your site and this thing is busted over here. Are you the guy in charge of that? You'd be like, what
Yeah.
do you mean it's busted? Like, oh, well, I can show you. That part doesn't seem new to me. Um, the promise to share insights, I would actually amend that because I don't want a promise to share insights, or I don't want to do something to earn
Yeah.
the insight. I just want the insight. So
Totally.
we used to like gate these kinds of things, and now that gate has to be like so easy to get through or get around. It has to be the most minimal amount of effort. Otherwise, somebody's going somewhere else where they don't have to jump through that hoop, I think.
Yeah.
So I'd rather just somebody give me the insight, show me the exact problem straight away. And I don't know about the other free stuff kind of concept, unless it's specifically helping them in some particular way. Like if I'm prospecting Kayla and I'm trying to, start the relationship and stuff, I might just say, hey, do you have a webinar coming up? I'm happy to help you out. I see you've been on a couple podcasts. Like, are you looking to get on more of those? I have one and I can introduce you to 3 other people. Like, just help this person do their job without really trying to seek anything directly, in return, or be compensated in some kind of way. All of those things, I think, really stand out, to me right now. But don't gate it. Don't make it difficult. Don't make people jump through a bunch of hoops. There's too many different options for people
Yep.
at this point in time, and all those options didn't used to be there, right?
Yeah.
There's so many now that people just don't have the time and energy to
Yep.
play games.
It's so interesting how that's evolved, Scott. You're again taking me down memory lane. All of that content used to be gated in order
Yeah,
to get a thought leadership piece or an interesting blog or some stats. You had to enter your email, right? And that wasn't all that long ago.
mm-mm. Yeah,
Now we've evolved where you don't want any of your content gated. Essentially it's free PR for you. It's
yeah.
really interesting how the evolution of that. And I think it can be somewhat compared to, I know we're going to talk about this, but AI and how these different business methods start to truly evolve. Uh, great point on the gated content. And candidly, if folks are on your site and they're reading great blog posts, you actually don't need them to enter their information in order to see it because there's technology out there. Shameless plug, ZoomInfo offers it where we can show you the companies that are actually
Yeah.
right on that page and even at the person level. So do not gate your content. It's really good thought leadership.
Yep. Two quick things on that. So just to double down on your point, this is a client of mine, Simpler. What they did I thought was really cool is they sold into ecom as well, and they actually analyzed 200 websites. So think Patagonia, North Face, Columbia, all that kind of stuff, and they put it together in a report that they would give out in these emails. So you could see like the average response time, how long they're open, the channels they communicate, like all of that kind of stuff. So think about like what you guys sell. It doesn't have to be stuff that you can see on the website. It could be if I sell clinical operations stuff, it could be the marketing team working together to create some sort of survey or analysis of a couple hundred of your clients on how they do things right now. People love benchmarks, and that's a great resource for your team to outbound. We got to keep moving. Let's talk about AI. Um, Specifically around what we think AI will replace in the next 12 months. And there's a couple things that I wanted to show you guys first, and I have some thoughts on this. One, Orem ran a really big sales development, a state of sales development, and they surveyed a bunch of sales development leaders and sales teams. And this is the stuff that you see on the screen here that people are using AI for. I think some of the stuff that sticks out is prospect research, the AI power dialers, like the follow ups, etc. Um, ZoomInfo had some really interesting data that in the C suite, a lot of people are starting to have AI or artificial intelligence in their roles. One of my clients, a large publicly traded company, I mean, it's literally the number one priority of their CRO is how is our team leveraging AI. My take on this personally, when I look at stuff like this, is I feel like AI is an extra set of hands. It is not yet an extra brain. And I think too many people are trying to use it as the brain to write the email for them. And it's just not what it's meant for. It's how do I take this thing and provide direction for it and have it do something that would require a lot of manual work for me. So what you see here on the screen, this is if I was reaching out to JB Hunt and I wanted to figure out a little bit more about, software that they might be releasing that our software solution could help with, like here are some triggers that it helped me find. And I think there's a lot of use cases here for AI, but I would love to just kind of kick this over to you. And Scott, we'll start with you. AI in 2025, what's your kind of take? Like, what do you think about AI, I guess? And do you see it replacing anything that salespeople are doing right now in 2025?
Yeah, it's the in 2025 and in the next 12 months part that gives me pause
Yeah.
because I, if you think for a second that very smart people and very wealthy people are not trying to find a way to have Scott, Jason, and Kayla produce one person or two person multi-billion dollar companies, you have your head in the sand. And as long as people are willing to throw heaps of money at this particular problem, it will get solved at some point in time. The technology will catch up. And for all of you who are saying people will always buy from people, you're wrong. You, because you grew up that way, may always want to buy from a person. My teenagers who are not growing up that way do not care about buying from another person whatsoever. They're experiencing the world completely differently. I myself bought a house in March, never spoke to somebody on the phone, never talked to a realtor, never talked to a lender, nothing. $1.3 million property out of state. Most people's eyes kind of go, what? That's crazy. Like you're insane to do that. Well, my threshold and tolerance for making large purchases has gone up compared to it was. And I'm 47 years old. I'm supposed to be in a generation where a phone call, still mattered and an interaction with the salesperson still mattered. So over the long arc of all this stuff, I believe that the lower end kind of roles, jobs, tactics, and everything, all of that stuff is going to get automated away at some point in time. I really have like a dystopian kind of viewpoint of this on the long tail. But inside the next 12 months, I'm not really sure that it's going to completely erase and get rid of anything inside the next 12 months. Even though the power of all these tools is, depending on who you believe, sort of doubling like every 3 to 6 months in what they're capable of doing and the speed of everything. I don't see SDRs disappearing in the next 12 months, AEs disappearing in the next 12 months. I think what disappears is a lot of brainstorming meetings that we all used to have. Remember when you used to go to a meeting and you'd sit around and try to generate ideas for marketing campaigns and
Yeah.
event planning, content campaigns, all that kind of shit? Nobody
Yeah.
does that anymore. You don't need to do that anymore. So hopefully it kills a bunch of meetings that we all hated in the first
Yeah.
place and was unnecessary. Right. I think people um, who are in some of those kind of real junior level type roles, some of that stuff is going to disappear. There's an interesting chart that you showed in who's using AI. Actually, what stood out to me was how few C-suite people are using AI. That was the first
Yeah.
thing that my eyes went to, right? Which tells me what those people are not really like interested and sold on AI, talking to AI. They're not interested in being approached via AI tools. So sort of the lower you come down off the ivory tower, the more open to this stuff people seem to
Yeah.
be. And I ask myself why that is. And if I want to talk to C-suite people, is it time for me to use only AI stuff or a lot of AI stuff? I don't really think so because they're not using it that much by comparison to I think manager was sort of the lowest on the totem pole that you had on that chart. So
Yeah.
inside 12 months, I don't think all that much is going to change in 2025. Long tail, I think it's going to probably revolutionize all of our profession, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Caleb, what are you seeing in terms of tasks? So if this is maybe not going to replace complete roles in the next 12 months, what are some of the tasks that you're seeing AI replace or do the majority of?
Well, my team, we head up new business enterprise sales for ZoomInfo. And on a weekly basis, we have a team meeting where we're talking about how we're leveraging AI, not only professionally, but even personally. I mean, last week we talked about AI on my Friday huddle, and one of my team members planned his entire trip to Japan using ChatGPT. So you can essentially eliminate Google and just go to ChatGPT. We recently ran an SDR training on persona level questions to ask to book a great meeting. Guess what we used? We used ChatGPT and Canvas. And it is good enough to get you your first draft. And
Yeah.
then you have to iterate off of that. I think if you haven't leveraged ChatGPT or another AI tool, get on the bandwagon. It does create efficiencies. Before every single meeting that I join, I don't go on the web. I use our AI tool, ZoomInfo's Copilot, and it will literally provide me with a summary of what I need to know to be equipped to help run our next meeting. It's incredibly convenient. To Scott's point, it eliminates the need for me to set up a 30-minute call to debrief with my rep for them to tell me what I need to know. It eliminates the need for me to listen to the chorus call because chorus is recorded and then pulled into ZoomInfo's AI Copilot tool. So it's going to give me an abridged version of what happened on the last 1, 2, 3, or 4 meetings. It's game changing. And if you haven't got on board with it yet, try it in your personal life. It really does create a more productive and efficient environment.
I think two quick things here is like account planning. I I've been running trainings with a couple enterprise teams, and it's when I ask account executives, let us know in the chat, how long does it take for you enterprise account executives to create an account plan? Because when I ask that question, it's like 2, 3 hours, multiple days for some. I'm like, you're spending more time creating an account plan than actually like working the account. You know what I mean? Like that math equation doesn't add up. Um, with ChatGPT and Gemini is like close. Um, Dude, in 15 to 30 minutes, you can generate like enough of an account plan with a few clicks of a button to know who you should be reaching out to, what they might care about, and where you might be able to add some value. Like you can really trim that down. I think AI is really going to help with stuff like that. Like you need to at least be doing your account planning. Messaging I've seen work pretty well too. You can take marketing personas that they've created because nothing against marketers, but the personas that marketing creates are not always, sales ready. It's not ready to be repurposed into an email and a talk track. Like you can have it do that work for you so that you can then again not create from scratch with a black pen, but edit with a red pen. Um, so I want to keep moving. That's AI. These last three topics, I think, are going to be much more. I think there's a lot more like stuff to dig into with these. So I want to make sure that we have time for it. So AI, it sounds like the consensus is it's probably not going to eliminate any jobs in the next 12 months, but it's certainly taking a lot off of a rep's plate, and you need to get comfortable with it. Download ChatGPT, like role play cold calls with it. I'm telling you, like it's pretty freaking good. It's pretty awesome. So I want to dig into next channels. And the question I posed here was, will 2025 be the death of the automated sequence? And I think with like sequences or cadences or whatever you want to call them, I think this data still rings true, and I'd love your guys' take on this. I mean, using multiple channels has never been more important. The more media types that we add into the channel, the higher the response rate's going to be. So from the work that I'm doing and what I'm seeing, you can't get away with just doing email or just doing LinkedIn or just phone. Like you got to be mixing all of those together. The other piece that I've seen a lot, because people complain all the time that the phone is not working that well. A lot of what I see around, like, just because people don't pick up the phone doesn't mean they don't click on the voicemail. Like, I'm curious for you too. I have a 100% open rate on voicemails. I don't listen to them. I just click to see who it's from, and I can tell right away if it's a spam call or not. What's the open rate for you two on voicemails that you get from unknown numbers? Do you click on them? Do you not click on them? Do you ignore them? What is it
That's
for you two?
interesting. My open rate on voicemails, whether I know somebody or not, is 0%. My voice, if you call me later today, Jason, listen to my voicemail. My voicemail literally says, I never, ever, ever check my voicemail. Don't bother. Shoot me a text
Yeah.
message. That's what it says. Mine's 0% versus
I
100%
just
on yours.
looked. I have 26 that I haven't listened to. That said, I do quickly glance at the transcription of it.
Yeah.
And I think if there's a compelling enough message, I will absolutely listen and respond.
Yeah. The
I mean,
data
text
shows
can
that,
be underrated as well, though. Like, I
yeah.
think about how I want to talk when I'm in a really busy day, and it's probably,
That's
it's probably text over voicemail. And I'm a person who's not offended if you text me. That's how I communicate.
same. And this is actually the most important part, I think, is you really need to understand how each particular individual wants to be communicated to. Like,
Yeah.
I hate voicemail and I text, you know, like a teenager. I'm like always on my phone, constantly texting people back and forth. That's by far the best way, fastest way to get a hold of me.
Yeah.
Right. But other people are not like that. So if Jason's a phone guy, why am I emailing him? If Kayla's a text person, why would I leave a voicemail? Right. And I don't think we spend enough time like really understanding who each person is and hit them in the channel that, you know, they like the most. And you might think, well, how do I know? And that could be true in in sub segments that you're selling to, but anybody who's selling to a segment that is very active on LinkedIn, people leave clues all over the place. There's breadcrumbs everywhere. If I go read Jason's content for the last year, he's always talking about things he likes, things he doesn't like. So I would never try to get a hold of him utilizing any of the things that he's specifically called out that he doesn't like, ever. And I would lean heavily into the things that he's mentioned before that he does like. Right.
I have one team member who, and this is after we've had the first meeting, but they will straight up say, hey, Scott, do you mind if I text you? What I see is most folks like that because it's kind of quick and easy to get back to. I promise I won't blow up your phone. But for some quick questions, do you mind if I shoot you a text? I'll send my follow-ups via email. Or is there a better way? And you seek permission. If they say, no, I find it disrespectful, it's my personal phone, I don't want to be texted, cool. You know the deal. You don't send that person a text. I have never gotten that response, though. I have never gotten that response.
And this is why it's so important to do multi-channel, because you will figure out, like, you don't know what their communication preferences are, so you want to be a little bit everywhere if you don't have a lot of information on the person. I think with voicemail, the number one tip I could give you here is they need to be 20 to 30 seconds or less, and point them to an email. Give them the subject line of the email that you sent them that is hopefully a good email, instead of asking for a call back. Data shows you're going to get, and I see this in action as well, your email reply rates are going to nearly double when you do that. And if you leave good voicemails, the second, third, fourth, fifth time you call someone, the pickup rate increases too if you leave a good voicemail. One last thing that I want to show you and really kind of bring this one home is email reply rates and like length of emails. So this is data from Lavender. So Lavender literally, I think they have 30 million emails going through their system on a monthly basis. A lot of them cold emails. When they segmented out the cold emails and the first emails, the ones that got the highest reply rate were the ones that were the shortest. And does that mean you need to send 25-word emails? No. But 50 to 75 words, I don't know if that sounds like a lot or a little to everyone watching and listening right now, but it's like 4 sentences. like short sentences. The reason why I'm showing all of this stuff is that I think with channels, what's really important to understand is to think about how you're accommodating shorter attention spans. So I don't know if either of you two have TikTok. I had to delete it. But when I had TikTok and I was watching videos, it sucked me into the vortex for like 2 hours. And I could not stand to watch a 10-minute YouTube video. It was like so long. It was like I could not stand to watch a 10-minute video or listen to a 1 hour podcast after that. I think a lot of what our society is experiencing, I mean, a lot of the people that we reach out to have shorter attention spans. So from a channel perspective, I don't personally believe anyone's channel is like dead right now, but I do believe that that means your email's got to be shorter and to the point. Your voicemail's got to be shorter and to the point. The way we communicate has to be more succinct because there's just more garbage that people have to filter through. But I'll kind of open it up to you two. What is your take on channels? We haven't talked about in person and in real life. Like for enterprise people, like stopping by in person or mailing stuff is super effective right now too, because people just don't do it. But what are you guys seeing from a channel perspective, and where do you think the opportunity might be?
Well, I think you bring up a really good point about short and sweet, and that's because that's how we're currently, taking in all of this content. You bring up social media, TikTok, 10-second videos. Scott talks about how he's texting constantly. Typically, a novel isn't in a text message. It's short and to the point. Emails should be in a similar format. Yes, when we're proposing a robust solution, and solving major business challenges, which in my space is upmarket, in person is phenomenal. And I think that there's a world where it's important to cultivate relationships there. I think that there's also a world where we're just going to see more and more from an e-commerce standpoint, specifically in that SMB market, where it's really as easy as checking out of an Amazon cart. I think
Yeah.
gifting is real. I think it's awesome. I think it needs to be thoughtful. It can't just be generic. And typically, something about that person beforehand. I think that an email can be really thoughtful. I was being sold to, a year or so ago, and I love my dogs. And somehow this person found the fact that I have Bernese Mountain Dogs and put that in the email. You're damn right he got a response from me because it was personal. It was not, this blanket sequence that you just let it rip and you're hoping, it's a Hail Mary. So I think channels work if they're genuine and thoughtful.
Yeah. Well, first of all, if I was going to prospect Kayla, I know exactly what I would do right now.
There
So
you go.
appreciate
Exactly.
that. And hopefully people pay attention to these kinds of things. Exactly what I said. People leave breadcrumbs all the time
Yeah.
about what they like and and what they don't like. I believe that we're headed towards basically a fully automated impersonal world where people are self-isolating and self-selecting out of like communication the way that I grew up. So in order to stand out in that kind of world, I think you need to do the exact opposite of what everybody else is doing. So nobody's writing handwritten letters. Well, I'm writing handwritten letters again. Nobody's dropping by offices in person. I'm dropping by offices in person. I'm going to do all the things that basically prove that I'm a human and that I'm not AI and that I'm not auto generated, that I'm real, basically. So when everything is moving towards this direction of efficiency gains, do this at scale, do that at scale, I'm doing the opposite. I'm going to start doing things that don't scale at all. And I think that that's what will stand out. And, perfect example of this, you talk about a channel, the referral channel is this way. And I've been talking about this for 2 years now. So for 2 years, I've been telling people that the phone is in trouble and email is in trouble. And what works is peer-to-peer referrals, right? I know Jason. This is true, by the way. I didn't know Kayla. I've never talked to her before until this call. But Jason knows us both, presumably friends, trust, on there's like mutual trust with her and me. So I might go to Jason and say, hey, man, I'm trying to get a hold of Kayla, not very successfully. Do you know her well enough to make an intro? Here's a little bit about the problem that she might have and how we solve it over here. And he might say, yeah, all right, I know her pretty good. I know Scott. I trust Scott. Let me see if Kayla's interested. So now he sends a message to Kayla and says, hey, I don't know if you have this problem or not, but if you do, you might want to talk to Scott. I can vouch for him. Good dude, good product. He won't waste your time. Don't take the meeting just for the hell of it. Only take it if, you have this problem or not. And then Kayla will say, oh, I trust Jason. I do actually kind of have this problem. Sure. Yep. I'll take the meeting. Those meetings close at a far higher clip with a faster sales cycle. They typically have a higher ACV and they are less problematic for customer success teams to deal with. They submit less tickets, so they're happier customers with a longer LTV. People have ignored this channel historically beyond early stage founders going to their VCs who gave them their first check and saying, hey, can you introduce me to a customer or two? That's about all people have done. Or they put together this referral program that is very passive and almost latent and inactive. So ZoomInfo has a referral program, for example. So I'll pick on Kayla for a second. I signed up for the referral program, but it's very passive, meaning they don't come to me ever. They wait for me to send things their way. That's a mistake. What I would do if I was Kayla and I wanted to blow this channel up, okay, and create about $40 million in pipeline in 2025, is I would rejigger it. I would sign up 100 versions of Jason and Scott who have big networks, who are well connected, who probably know lots of their buyers. And every 2 weeks, I'd send them a little list of 50 to 100 prospects that they're trying to get a hold of. And I'd say, hey, Scott, do you know any of these people? Hey, Jason, do you know any of these people? And I would proactively seek out these referrals. Right. And I did this math with Jason yesterday. If you got $100,000 ACV, people like me and Jason probably know about 5% of Kayla's prospects well enough to text right now and make those introductions happen. Right. So between myself, I could probably open up about $400,000 in pipeline. Jason can open up another 400. That's 800K. That's two people. If he did that across 100 people, that's $40 million of pipeline on $100,000 ACV. Even if your close rate is trash, even if you close at even 25%, that's $10 million in ARR that Kayla adds next year through this referral program. But people don't do this, and I don't understand why. And that's, so you talk about like things that maybe don't scale. There's no way to programmatically like automate this type of work. That's why people don't do it. And so what's going to win are people who spend the time doing things like this rather than spending the time trying to write the perfect email sequence or the perfect fucking subject line, right? That stuff's not going to work. It's the stuff that historically doesn't scale that will work.
Yep. I love that take.
All really good. And I think to your point, Scott, like more isn't necessarily more. And so oftentimes we think, more leads, more folks in the pipeline, more opportunities. That doesn't necessarily equate to revenue. And to Scott's good point, referrals are real, especially if you have somebody, vouching for you and your product. And you just have to, do right by your network. And your network can also be your customers. You just have to do right by them, right? And then it's no big deal to ask them who in their network they could refer you to, who could potentially use your solution.
And, somebody in the, sorry, Jason, somebody in the chat said like, what's the incentive, right? Well, you have to pay people. I'm not doing this stuff out of the goodness of my heart. People have realized now that their networks are not for philanthropy. Their networks are valuable, and their networks are things that people are monetizing like crazy. So I'm willing to do that kind of work if somebody's going to pay me 10 to 20% of first year's ARR, which in SaaS at least is the typical payout. So if I'm referring a customer to Kayla and she's closing a $100,000 deal off of it, and I'm getting paid 10 to 20 grand to make an intro, you best believe I'm all over that, right? Now, if her price point is $1,000 and I'm only making $100 on a referral, I might not care. It might not be worth my time. But if you're selling something of value, I'm telling you, people will participate in this when they
Yeah.
see the results like that.
There's
Yeah.
also a world where you can ask for referrals within an existing opportunity. So if your product or service can be used across multiple departments, and maybe you're with the marketing team, but sales or finance would be advantageous to get in front of them. There's a world where you can try to make a win-win there. And to Scott's point, typically folks aren't just doing it out of the goodness of their heart. It's great if there's a give there, because you're asking for something in return. But it's a big win for you because you'll likely grow your share of wallet. You're going to get additional stakeholders, um, likely increase the contract value on that deal.
Yeah, I think the
But
big thing for this is like the operationalizing, like the rhythm, the operational rhythm of it. So it's like all of this stuff is great. It's like sales leaders just now need to talk about this as much as they talk about pipeline and wanting to know about deals. Like the referral piece just has to be a part of like the one-on-ones, the team
yeah,
meetings, the QBRs. There has to be enablement around it. Because there's like you said, Scott, there's referral programs, but then Kayla, to your point, there's all the other little stuff too. Like, are we getting referral from every client that you close? Are you asking for referrals during the sales process, if it makes sense?
Will
There's
they do
little
a written
stuff like,
testimonial? Can you
yeah,
use their brand?
yeah, there's little stuff too, like with LinkedIn Sales Navigator, there's a really easy way to use team links and see who else is like just the enablement around how to ask people internally at your company to introduce you to someone in their network. There's so much of that that is, outbound. Um, but that's the stuff, because people are asking about in the chat, that's the stuff that doesn't scale. That requires like human, thoughtful effort that isn't done through a sequencing platform.
and that's what
That's
works. That's what's been
that's
working
LinkedIn.
more than anything
Exactly.
else. Yeah.
Um,
People are still stuck in worrying about like, well, how do I freaking report on this? Where do I give attribution? This screws up my activity metrics. Too many sales leaders still care about that shit when all they should care about is the outcome. What works? Oh, that's working. Well, we're going to lean into it. That
Do
other stuff
more
is
of
not
it.
working. Get away from it. What do I want my team spending time on? Stuff that works or doesn't. Would I rather have these 557 reps on the call right now go make 100 cold calls today, or spend the time to put together lists sending out to all these different like influencers and well networked people? There's no comparison. There's no compare. My clients that are operating this way, predominantly they're at that more of an earlier mid stage type size of the company, stage of the company. This channel is the only one growing and the only one performing at a high level. So they're leaning more into it. And they've got leadership that recognizes, well, we need new KPIs. We need new activity metrics. We need to stop caring about some of these things as much and start caring more about these things because this is what's working.
yep. All right, we got one more to cover. So that covered the fourth thing, referrals. Um, I don't know that Adam Robinson necessarily came up with this concept, but he certainly coined this term, this inbound led outbound. So I want to show an example of what this is. And the idea here is that outbound is always thought of as this really super cold thing. And it just doesn't have to be like that. I mean, this is a meeting that I landed with an exec at Square. Like he posted a piece of content on the left. I commented on that post. We had been connected for a while, and then I just sent him a cold email. You know what I mean? So I just sent you an email and we got a meeting for it. Um, I think that there's this whole just like middle ground of like what would normally be called inbound, but is not a demo request. It's all of these people that get into your ecosystem through webinars, gated content, they're visiting the website, etc. To me, the ceiling of the outbound engine has always been your marketing engine. Like your outbound will only be as good as your marketing. There's something to be said about a ZoomInfo or a Shopify or whoever that has such great brand recognition that when you call people, a lot of them recognize your brand. And that's marketing, right? What are your guys' takes on, and Scott, I'll kick this first question your way, around this idea that how do we improve like our marketing efforts to improve our outbound efforts? Like, how do we do a better job of creating and capturing some of the demand of the ecosystem that is just already there of people that know who we are, that are consuming our content, but have not said, hey, I want a demo yet?
Well, first of all, you can't run this motion unless you actually have a brand that carries water. So everybody who's neglected their digital online network, their LinkedIn presence, you know, you have no chance to do what Adam's done or any other um, founders are doing, or sales reps and sales leaders for that matter. Uh, it requires consistency of effort. To your point, how do you capture this stuff? You have to be consistent with it. People will go try and build their network or create content for a couple weeks or a month, and then they'll stop and be like, this doesn't work. And those
Yeah.
are the same people that for years made thousands of cold calls and got hung up on, and yet they kept picking up the phone. So that's like kind of a weird contradictory dynamic, to me. um, you have to talk about things that you know and not things that you wish you knew. So you have to stay in your lane of expertise. So you're viewed as somebody that is intelligent and has value. That they're adding things like this. It has to become a part of the daily kind of sales motion, if you will. It's very difficult to track, for example, activity metrics around like how many comments did you leave on other people's LinkedIn posts today, right?
Yeah.
So somewhere there's some shitty sales manager who's looking at, your comment on the LinkedIn post going, well, I can't track that. How do I know that that works? How many of those did you do? Jason's wasting his time all day long. You didn't make any calls. Okay. So we have to get away from that stuff, like I said, and care more about the outcomes that matter. And then you have to teach people how to do it. There's a right way and a wrong way to do it. If you look at Jason's comment, he didn't try to sell anything. He didn't even talk. All he said was like, "This is interesting," something like that,
Yeah.
right? He didn't write some big, huge novel. Didn't try to sell anything. Didn't try to pitch anybody. So you got to educate people who are not used to operating this way on what works and what doesn't. And some of those things takes time. And how willing are you to pause in the middle of your day and take time and train and educate your sellers to get better at this stuff? How many sales leaders are willing to do that? How many sales leaders are willing to take their reps off the phone for half a day, a week, and sacrifice quotes those calls and those emails to teach people how to get in touch with these people, how to respond to people, how to send somebody a connection request the right way? I talk to people all day long, sales leaders and founders and ICs. Almost nobody does that. They're too fixated on like, well, I have to build pipeline. I have to get the dollar. I have to get that shiny coin like right now. And sometimes you just got to slow down in order to speed up.
Yeah. I think one of the best, examples of this is, like Henry is so active at ZoomInfo, like on LinkedIn. It's like, is your leadership team setting an example?
Yeah,
You know what I mean? It's like, are the
great
leaders at
example.
your
And
company
at the
setting an
forefront of
example?
AI. So I think, Scott, you brought up a really good point, and it's that not everyone on this call is working for this big company that's super recognized from a brand perspective. But every single person on this call can create your own brand as a sales professional. And that's what I took as he's referring to. And being naturally curious is really, really important. And you're able to do some of those things using social media, using those different channels that marketing, quite frankly, can't assist with.
Yep. So, we got a couple minutes left here. I thought that what we could do is just take a couple of questions that we didn't get a chance to get to. Taylor Riley asks, what are your thoughts on parallel dialers like Nooks or Orem with less pickups and cold calls? Getting a higher volume is great, but you do far less pre-call research. What's your guys' hot take on dialers.
Yeah, you're gonna have to read that again slower for me to respond. Sorry, Jason.
What are your thoughts on parallel dialers like Nooks or Orem with less pickups on cold calls? Getting a higher volume is great, but you do far less pre-call research. What's your guys' take on dialers?
In the space that, my team sells into, we're looking to get in front of, typically folks director or higher. And I want to be well prepared and have a meaningful conversation when I get that person on the phone. And so in my world, more isn't necessarily more.
Yeah, I think it's very dependent on who you sell to and what you're selling. If I'm selling to the Fortune 500, I don't need a parallel dialer. If I'm selling to real estate agents, like we were talking about, that might be pretty smooth. I might like that. Massive TAM, huge group of people wash out of that industry every year and get replaced by a new group, right?
Similar value proposition regardless across that persona.
Right. So, I, I'm anti them in some environments and probably for them in others. That's the best answer that I could give.
If you're doing SMB or smaller mid market, like it's absolutely going to help you a ton.
Yeah.
One more question. What's your hot take on AI SDR firms?
My hot take is the technology is not good enough yet, but it will be at some point in time.
Yeah, it's coming.
Yeah, I
It
think with
is
the AI SDR
inevitable.
firm, what I find is that they actually use a lot of people at those firms to do the stuff. So they're not really doing like pure automated AI anyways. Um, but yeah, we're going to be in real trouble when most of the SDR outreach is coming from AI. Even if it's good, we're going to be in because the volume is just going to be so astronomically high. Um, all right, you guys. Scott, Kayla, thank you so much for spending time with us today. This
Hey,
is
you're
awesome.
welcome.
I
Thank you
loved
both.
hearing a lot of these hot takes. And for the audience, we had like 650 people show up live today. So thank you everyone for showing up, spending time with us, and all the interaction and questions and all that kind of good stuff. Make sure to connect with these two on LinkedIn. Follow Outbound Squad. We'll have more. We do one of these every other week or so. And go check out ZoomInfo. And that's all I got for you, team. Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye,
Have a
everybody.
good one.
Thank you.
We will see you later.